Good morning, beautiful people. It's Rochelle Ray, your prosperous life coach, mental health counselor, and motivational speaker. Just wanted to come on and talk about a subject that's not really widely addressed in the African American community. A couple of days ago, I was watching Greenleaf. And so, if you guys have followed that series, then you'll know the characters that I'm talking about. And then the season the last semester, this is season 5. So in season 4, we all found out that Grace had a son. And so her son was given up or placed in the foster care because she was a young teenage parent and didn't want her family to know, trying to escape from her family. And so I'm going to talk about what happened in the new season, season 5, episode 1 at the end. It ended with a bang. So we're going to look at the life of her son. He was born, didn't know his parents, was placed in foster care or given up at birth, bounced around in the system, in the foster care system, from different foster families, never adopted, grows up, gets into trouble, and then when they bring him in, he's in jail or getting ready to get out. And then once he's out, he commits this crime for drugs. So not only is this character dealing with abandonment issues and probably feeling unloved, low self-esteem, no self-worth, and all of this is building up over time to up into his young adulthood and until he, reaches out and discover who his parents are. And so just keep that at the forefront of what I'm getting ready to introduce to you about how all these things that's going on with this character, people actually face this in real life. And so if you don't know, a lot of the topics that the show has had in their different segments was research done based off of things that have happened in actual churches. Well, in our African American community, a lot of times it's taboo. They don't talk about it or keep it hush because they don't want to deal with it, or they don't know how to deal with it, or the resources or knowledge hasn't been put out there to know how to seek help. And a lot of it is based off of stigmas, and that our people will not be afforded the same treatment as other races have been. And part of that is due to the research on the syphilis study and Medgar Evers boys. And when they had a treatment, they still didn't give these young men the treatment. A lot of them, some of them died. Some of them live with this disease based off of this research, which was unethical study, because once you find out you have a treatment, you have to give the treatment to the participants in the research study. So a lot of the stigmas we have in our community kind of stems from that. And I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's that sometimes we become overly cautious and we hurt ourselves because we don't seek out the knowledge. And maybe even in that time frame, we didn't have a lot of African American social workers and mental health professionals and psychologists and psychiatrists, that could help out on a grander scale. So even those people who were going to school to study for that were even limited or maybe denied access into those programs, where now things have changed somewhat, and we begin to see more ethnicities, launch into those areas. And so based off of this character, he has abandonment issues. He has low self-esteem, low self-worth. He's committing crimes and acting out. All of this is because of how he was brought up in the events that occurred into his life. And so that was season 4. Now in season 5, with the first episode, there's a rash of crimes going on. And so they find someone else who they put the crime on. But in his heart, he knows that he did this one crime that they did catch him for. And Grace, because of the decisions she made, she went on without her son. And so now that she has him back, and he's like, well, I committed. And she's like, I know, but maybe this is a chance for you can you accept that chance? And so in a way, it's her being selfish as a mom because she wants to have that time with him and for him to be free. But then even as a minister, where does your moral code, your ethical code kick in and say, yeah, you did it. Okay, let's see. Maybe it'll be a lesson sentence. Maybe you won't go. Maybe you'll get probation. And so he has this look on his face when he looks at her like, really? And so he's even conflicted within himself that, okay, you're my mom and you're a minister, but yet you're showing me this different face. And that's where we get the term being a hypocrite or an actor or a pretender. You're this way, but now with me, I'm seeing this other side, but you stand for this. So how can you not want me to go? Because in the scene, you could see where he was torn. And we would call that in the counseling profession, emotional pain. So you could see some of the emotional and inner turmoil this character was going through because he really did want to come forth and, tell the truth and say, no, I didn't do the other crimes, but the one that you did have me on camera for, it really was me. And so he agrees that, okay, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to accept that we'll get together. So as the things play out and it gets to the end, they're like, well, where is he? They're getting ready to go out. Well, no one can find him. So she goes back into the house, into his room. His bag is still there. However, the bathroom door is locked. And so she's knocking, banging on the door, and he doesn't answer. So finally she, breaks it in, and she sees him lying on the floor in a pool of his blood. Well, today's topic is about suicide. Some people have emotional pain that is so strong and so intense that the only way they see help is to end their life. Because they're like, I'm doing everything I know to do, but yet nothing is still working. I still don't have this relief from this inner pain, this emotional pain that I'm having. Well, he's there in a pool of blood. His wrists are slit, which is called cutting. And so he chose to end his life in committing suicide by cutting his wrist. So she's there, head in her lap, crying, calling out for help. So a lot of times in the African American community, we don't talk about suicide or we don't address it. And this is a real thing that a lot of people go through. So if you can be aware of the warning signs and risk factors, you'll be able to look for those to people you say, oh, their behavior has changed suddenly. Well, this will be a clue, not to say that everyone who has these behaviors is thinking about suicide, but it'll let you be aware and know, okay, let me be there to watch. Because a person who's in a suicidal state, you don't want to leave them alone. You want to put them under a watch until that passes, and you want to provide help for them and hope for them during that time while they're dealing with that. So I'm going to talk about some warning signs and risk factors. These don't necessarily mean that they cause suicide. However, they provide us signals, things that we can look out for and inquire about if we see that in a person that we care about and that they have been acting irrational, not like their regular self. And so it's a way to be there to help them get help that they need and not brush it in, and so that they don't take these risky behaviors trying to end their life thinking that's the only way to get a way out. So some of the warning signs is if you notice someone constantly talking about wanting to die or to kill themselves. Okay, if this is out of the blue and they seem fine, inquire more about that. Say, hey, tell me, where is that coming from? You're thinking about dying or you're wanting to die and you're wanting to kill yourself. So ask them some questions and give them room to talk about it, and that'll let you know, oh, I need to alert someone or maybe even recommend, hey, have you considered going to a therapist, to a counselor, or even to your primary care physician, which would be an entryway because they can provide local therapists and counselors in your area, depending on where you are. So that's just the entryway to get help. Other things to look for is that they are looking for a way out. They're looking for a way to carry out the suicide. So if they say, hey, I've been thinking about this, and then you could be like, okay, listen. And then if they go on while they're sharing with you why they're wanting to do this and say, yeah, I've been looking for a way. I'm thinking about buying a gun, or I have a gun, or, such and such bridge. So that would let you know that they are leaning toward that direction, because not only are they talking about it and they're wanting to do it, but they are thinking of ways to carry it out. Okay, so that's another warning sign that you want to be aware of. Also, they talk about feeling hopeless, that they don't have hope, they don't have a purpose, there's no reason for them to live. Why should they go on? So that's another warning sign to look for. I did some videos a while back dealing with grief and how to grieve and go through the grieving process. Someone who has lost someone, and as they go through the grieving process and they get stuck in complicated grief, you definitely want to look out for these warning signs, okay? Because the loss is so great to them, they feel like they can't go on, and they may actually carry it out because they want to be with the loved one that they lost more than they want to continue on living. So this is another aspect that you can have if you're dealing with someone who just lost some. And we'll talk about some risk factors as well that will say, oh, okay, yeah, this may lead to that. But going back to the warning signs, they begin to think that they are a burden to others. And they may say things like, well, you don't have to worry about me anymore. I won't burden you. Won't be much longer. Those are all talks about that are leading them along the path of suicide. So when you hear those type of statements, you want to, have a flag go off and say, oh, okay, I need to either suggest to them to get help, go with them to get help, or, let someone who's closer to them that they may listen to help them to get help. So you want to come from a good place, not from a place of judging, because you don't know when you would be in that position, because different things trigger different people and bring them to that point. Another warning sign to look for is the increase of alcohol and drugs. If they are not a recreational user, not a social drinker, and you notice that, oh, they sure have been drinking a lot of wine, drinking a lot of alcohol in excess, or if they've never done it and you're seeing them do it, that's a warning sign that they are crying out for help and that they're trying to bury that emotional pain that they have. And so alcohol is known as a depressant. It depresses your emotion. And some drugs are known as uppers. They give you happy. They make you excited and more vibrant. And so when people who are in that cycle, they take the drugs to get up and be awake and moving around, feeling like themselves. And then because they can't sleep at night, they'll turn to alcohol to suppress that because it mellows them out so they can sleep. And so that's how that vicious cycle starts with drug and alcohol abuse. But that is also a warning sign that maybe the person that is contemplating suicide. So another warning sign is that they're acting out or they're anxious. They any little thing sets them off and they're very agitated. There's nothing you can do to calm them down or to soothe them. Okay, so these are all warning signs. Additionally, they have risky behaviors. Maybe they weren't a risk taker, but they're jumping on the freeway and they're speeding and they're dashing in between cars. Maybe it's a train track and they're walking on the train track knowing the train is getting ready to come. So they're doing all of these behaviors they wouldn't normally do if they were themselves. Okay. Other things that they tend to do is withdraw. They withdraw from others. They begin to isolate themselves. Sometimes people go into a fit of rage, and you're like, wait a minute, they don't really get upset like that. They don't really, go into a rage, or either they're seeking revenge. So those will let you know, oh, okay, I need to look into this and I need to observe them. They have these extreme mood swings. You normally hear, then they go far left, far right, and they just swing back. Those are all warning signs that need to be checked into, inquired about, that can lead to suicide. Not saying that they cause it, but those are warning signs, and that person needs help. So now I'm going to discuss some risk factors. These risk factors don't cause it, but it is another way to let you know that I'm seeing these things. They definitely need to have help. So I need to get them help. So people who have had mental health issues, they can be looked out to say, okay, these are risk factors for them in possibly committing suicide. Especially people who have been diagnosed with certain mood disorders, okay? So they are at a higher risk of committing suicide. Again, like I stated, alcohol, substance abuse, they are impulsive in their behavior, or they are aggressive. They go out on a shopping spree, and that's something that they typically don't do. Or they don't gamble, but all of a sudden now they're going to casinos gambling, that type of thing. Or either they're aggressive toward others, always, taking the defense and, want to be forceful with you. So those are risk factors. Another risk factor is there's a history of trauma or abuse. They have experienced trauma in their life, or they have been abused and they haven't gotten those issues dealt with, like I was referring to in the sitcom, the series Greenleaf, where Grace's son, he experienced trauma. And so him committing suicide was led up to that based off of the things he experienced as a character, and not having that sturdy foundation and not knowing who your parents are, and then finding out all of a sudden. So you can see how that can play a part. And for him, that was a risk factor. On the TV show, it showed how he drank a lot. Okay, so that's something to be aware of, and that should have been addressed with him. They have a major physical illness, someone who has had a major physical illness, and they have not healed or returned back to their normal selves. Sometimes that is a risk factor for them wanting to commit suicide. Another risk factor is having a family history of suicide. Maybe someone in the family committed suicide because they didn't know how to get help or handle their pain. In the African American community, we have an aunt or uncle or cousin, that, oh, they not right. They always stay in the room, just leave them alone. We look after them. They'll be all right. Something triggers them and they get agitated and they say, okay, come on. And we put them in the room. So if they have had a history of suicide in the family or someone close to them, that is a risk factor, because then they see that as, oh, that's a way to solve my problem, to get rid of this emotional pain that I have, when it's not. It causes, more problems, and it leaves a lot of unanswered questions. Loss is a risk factor. Loss of a job, finances, relationship, loss of home, a place to sleep, is also a risk factor. Sometimes you can see these CEOs of major companies, when the companies start doing bad and they don't know how to get a handle on it. Sometimes you'll see them because they're like, oh, I'm going to be in financial ruin, so let me just take my life and end my life. You see this behavior in that level of employment as well with some of these execs. Uh, the next thing to be aware of is that, do they have access, lethal means to carry it out, such as knives, pills laying around the house, or someone else's medicine? They'll take that. Guns, a car, freeway, train track. If they have a plan and the means to carry it out, and then they say, oh, by next week or by next month, I won't be a bother to you anymore, that lets you know that they've thought about it, they planned it out, they have the resources or the means to carry it out, and they've also selected a date. Now, something else you need to be aware of is if someone you know you're close to has had all of these other things and they begin to give you their most treasured possessions or things that they prize or like, and you know they like those things, that's a sure hint that they are close to committing the act of suicide. So if someone has all of these other things going on and they begin to give you their what they consider valuable and precious to them, they are close to enacting their plan. Another thing, people say, oh, I saw Sam. They came and said, hey, it's been a while, I hadn't seen you, just want to come and say hi or say bye to you. And you may think, oh, maybe they're just having a bad day or they're off. No, they're saying their final goodbyes to you. So things like that are warning signs that we need to say, okay, let me slow down and see what's really going on. How are you really doing? And then you want to take this person and get them help, and you want to observe them 24 to 48, 72 hours until that mood passes. And once it passes and they come back to a semi-normal state, then you can begin to say, hey, let's go get some help and let's put you into treatment so those issues can be worked with. Because when you take them while they're in that state, they will be admitted into the hospital and they will be observed. Sometimes they need medicine, sometimes they don't, but they will be under a suicide watch by whatever facility, or if they're home with you, doctors will say, okay, you need to seriously watch them. Do not leave them alone. And then once it passes and their brain functioning comes back to a normal state, then they will be ready to enter treatment. Because when they're in that phase, you're not really going to get through to them, but you do want to talk to them about hope, about having hope, about finding a purpose, things that they used to like to do. And then once you can get them latched onto that hope and then get them into treatment, they have a better chance of surviving that risk of suicide and getting put on the right path to get the help they need. And like I mentioned earlier, there's a stigma. Well, I want you guys to know you don't have to feel ashamed of asking for help, because we all need help. No one is above needing help. We all need help. And even as mental health counselors, it's required by law and in our code of ethics that we have a self-care plan and that we get help. In my own professional career, I have worked with doctors and social workers and others in the profession that come in because they need help. So none of us is above help. And our mental health is just as important as our physical health, as our health in all of these other areas. So it's okay to ask for help, and keep asking until you can get to the right person. Maybe the people you're asking is not the right group of people to ask. So if you don't have the right group or they don't know what to do, go to your medical physician, your primary care doctor, and let them know, hey, I'm struggling, with my mental health, or I've been having these thoughts. Can you recommend me to a counselor, to a therapist? And then they can get you a list of therapists in your area that you can go and see and help you get to being at your optimal mental health. Okay. Another risk factor is there have been a lack of services, in some of our African American communities, and because we haven't had access. So hopefully those things will change, but definitely go to your primary care physician to get help, and that'll be a doorway for you getting the help and maybe finding out, if there's anyone in your area that can help you. And lastly, exposure to others, the media, the internet. Now, I'm not saying that talking about suicide will lead to suicide. No, because these conversations need to be had. I'm saying that if a person is already there and they have been exposed to this, then that solidifies in their mind that this is a way out for me, when in essence, it's not. They just need to be connected to someone that can help them. Okay, so there was also a stigma about, oh, don't talk about it, don't tell your teenagers or whatever, it may make them commit. No, it will not make them commit suicide. It will help them to be aware and to know that if they struggle with their mental health, there is hope, and that someone is available to help them, whether it's their school counselor who can give them resources in the community, a teacher who can refer them, their parents. So if you're a parent, hopefully you have this conversation. If you know someone, hopefully you'll have this conversation. Pass this video on, help as many people as you can help. But however, people who have these warning signs and they have these risk factors, and they are constantly exposed because they don't know how to get relief for the emotional pain that they have, that lingers even after a physical pain has been there. That emotional pain has to be dealt with, and it needs an outlet. And so that's why some people turn to cutting, because they say when they feel that cut, it helps to relieve the emotional pressure that they have, and that they feel like, oh, okay, I am alive, even though the trauma that I went through, the pain that I have is so horrific. This lets me know, okay, I can still feel, and they don't have that numbness there. But there is hope and there is relief. And so people who have tried to commit suicide by cutting and the suicide attempt fail, sometimes they often go into cutting. And so it's help out there and treatment out there to help them get over that cutting. So these are some warning signs you can look out for, some risk factors to take into account. If the person has any of these, then that's a signal for you to say, okay, let me offer them help, or at least be there with them physically to watch over them so that they don't do something rash, knowing that they really don't want to die. What it is a cry for help. So people who do these things, they're crying out for help, and they don't know how to get the help. They don't know how to heal that emotional pain. And all of these things are them crying out for someone to take notice of them and to help them. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of the warning signs for suicide, the risk factors that are involved for suicide, that there is no shame in asking for help. Reach out, ask for help, have that talk about it, okay? Because when we all have help and a hand extended out to help, we can all progress and be mentally healthy. So this is Rochelle Ray, your Prosperous Life Coach, mental health counselor, saying, may you prosper and be in good health, even as your mind prospers. Until next time, bye-bye.